I'm Seth Grant with Sailrite, and in today's tutorial video, we're going to show you how to make this beautiful wax canvas duffel bag that comes from a kit from Sailrite. One of the great things about these kits that include patterns is when you finish making the one out of wax canvas, you can use that pattern to make it out of any other fabric you want, and we have a list of the materials required in the description below the video. Wax canvas as a fabric is nearly waterproof, so if you put water on it, it's going to bead up and fall off.
While we do offer this kit in a variety of wax canvas colors, every one of the kits includes gray lining fabric. This kit does not include thread, but we recommend using a Tex 90 thread. For our kit, we're going to use black. In this first chapter, we'll be cutting out our patterns.
So your materials are usually going to come folded, and that will leave some crazing on the wax canvas, but it actually looks awesome with the crazing, and I'm actually going to add more crazing later on. So I'm going to unfold this, and then I'm going to unfold my pattern and place that directly on top. Like so. And I'm going to line this pattern, the big rectangle. I'll pull it all the way over here to save as much fabric as possible and line this rectangle up with this top edge. If it's straight, if not, you can always cut on that line too, right there. And now I'm going to take some pins and I'm going to pin in the seam allowance. That one looks like it needs to move over just a little bit. There we go. Pin inside the seam allowance, so right out here on this outside edge, and I'll just put 1 or 2 pins in each one of these. This is going to get in the way of my scissors. There we go. So pin this side. There we go. And I'll do the same thing on all these other panels. I'll put a pin up here in the seam allowance, here, here, here. Same thing with these little ones, pin here, and then I'll cut this out as a rectangle and then cut across here later. And then just 2 pins over here on this one. Pretty easy. And then when we're finished cutting these out, we will actually reuse this circular pattern. As it says here, use this pattern and cut out 2 circles from the lining material. So we'll cut out 2 circles using this pattern, and then the main body, we'll use this pattern to cut out the wax canvas, which we're on right now, and the lining fabric. So we'll have one of these that's lining fabric as well. So we've cut out all of our wax canvas pieces, and I'm not going to pin these to the top, and I'm actually not going to remove the wax canvas from this because it gives an awesome border to cut around. So for the 2 circles and this main body on our lining fabric, we're just going to lay them on top, hold it down with our hands, and cut around the perimeter just like this.
Creating zippered pockets is next.
So I have my 2 zippered pocket pieces here, so A and B, and the uppers as well. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take a scratch awl, and I'm going to mark on all these locations that say single hem on both the lower portion and the upper. And an awl works wonderfully to mark wax canvas. You don't need a marking utensil. I'll use this throughout the video to strike all my lines and everything. I'll do the same thing I'm going to do with this panel, but I'm just going to show you how to make one of the pockets because the process is the exact same, so we're just going to work on this one. Okay, now I'm going to remove the pins on both of these. And I'll take my clear acrylic ruler, and I'll use those little lines I struck to strike a line all the way across the material on both this and this. And another awesome thing about wax canvas is it creases wonderfully. So I have to fold to that line, and I'm just going to fold up and crease it down. And I don't need any basting tape. So this is now the top of my pocket, and this fold is the bottom of my pocket. Now when you're using your awl, you notice you can see a little bit of line here on this is the outside of the pocket. If you press too hard, you're going to see this, it's going to be a lot more, it's going to stand out a lot more. So press softly when you make your lines. Okay, I've cut off a section of my zipper that's about a ½ inch longer on each side, and I'm going to split this in half. So just peel it apart, set one side aside, and we'll work on this larger portion first. And I need this hem, the raw end of the hem, to face down on the table when I'm putting the zipper on. And then I'm going to line this up to the top just like this and sew it on with the sewing machine. And you could pin this here, or you could also use clips. I'm just going to take it over there and sew it, but if you wanted to, you could clip this to the top, and that makes it a little easier, just like that. I'm going to have about a 1/2 inch extra zipper on this side, and then I'm going to move my needle into the left position, and then I'm going to line up the teeth of the zipper with the outside of this outside foot, lower it, do a little reversing here at the beginning, and then just sew across, lining it up to this edge. It's pretty easy. And then do some reversing when you get to the other end. So now that we've sewn that, we're going to take it and I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to fold it and crease it down directly on top of that stitch. So notice this is literally on the stitch all the way across. Okay, and then that's what it should look like on the outside, nice and even. And with my needle in the right position, I'm super close to this top edge, and that makes it so that there's nothing to catch on underneath here. So we're going to sew right here. I'm going to hold my trailers, do a little reversing here. This is going to get covered with webbing, and then I'm just going to use the right side of this inside foot as my guide. I'm not using the teeth because I want to be really close, but I also want to be consistent. So all the way down this. Then do a little bit of reversing at the end. There we go. And that's what she looks like right there. Okay, this is the top of our pocket, and we're going to want the hem to face down on the table just like this. And we're going to sew this zipper on with about a 1/2 inch out each side, just like this, and then flip it over and sew our top stitch. And we're not going to show this because it's the exact same process we just did with this portion of the pocket, and then we'll repeat those steps with zipper pocket upper B and zipper pocket lower A. So we'll end up having 2 pockets just like this. So here are 2 finished pockets next to one another, and now I'm going to take them and I'm going to zip them together, the 2 sides. So just feed this on so it's about in the middle, then feed this side on, and I want to get it relatively even, but I have excess on each side, so it's fine if it's not perfect. And then I will pull this slider on. Oops. Sometimes this can take a couple attempts. There we go. That's definitely the right position this time. There you go, and I'll zip this all the way through, and then I want these corners to be very similar. They don't have to be perfect because the webbing is going to run down each one of these sides, so the outside edges are going to be covered, but you don't want it to be really off. Okay, and we'll do the same thing with this one. You need to pull these sliders all the way off because we need to actually finish closing this zipper, and then when we put it on the second time, so we'll have to open this up again and put this on one more time, then we can leave the slider in place. So just peel it apart, feed that in there. There we go. And now I can leave the slider just here in the middle of the material, and I'll do the exact same thing with another slider on this one.
In this chapter, we'll be sewing the front pockets onto the main body.
Okay, so now I have the duffel bag main body. I removed both of the pins, and I'm going to take my scratch awl, and I'm going to roll back both of these ends to that line where it says top of pocket, and I'll just fold this directly on that line all the way across, just like that. Get it nice and even, and then I'll take my scratch awl. I'm going to look real close here, and I'm just going to scratch a light line all the way across this, so it doesn't have to be heavy. And you see these black bars? We're going to scratch the line all the way through those too. Just like that. And then I'll finish on this end. There's the end of it. And there we go. And there we go. This is the line for the top of our pocket. And I'm going to push this back down and do the same thing on this end. So now I'll take my pockets, now that I've struck both of those lines, and I'm going to place this pocket on so that it's approximately in the center of this line across the top here, just like that. And I'm going to trim these off in a second, but I want to show you this. So the webbing is actually going to cover all the way to the outside of this line, just like that. So the inside of the pocket's going to be covered up just on both sides. So now I'm going to trim off the ends of the zipper. And make sure your sliders are on. If your sliders aren't on, you are going to be in huge trouble later on. But right now, you're just make sure they're on there. Okay, and now I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew this top of this pocket down right here on top of this line. And then once that's done, I'll pull this tight and I'll sew the bottom on. So let's go show you that. Okay, my needle's in the right position, and I have the top of the pocket aligned to this line, as you can see. And I'm going to use the outside edge of this inside foot as my guide and sew right across the top of this. I'm holding my trailer. Do a little reversing here. We're obviously going to cover that with the webbing. And just sew straight across this. If you need to make a little adjustment, make sure your needle is buried. And just keep sewing. Okay, I'm going to pull this out, and then I'll switch over to the bottom of the pocket. So I'm just going to push this through into the throw of the sewing machine, and I'll move my needle into the left position and make sure that this pocket is flat. So I've flattened it out, and now I'll sew down the bottom of the pocket in the same manner, using the outside edge of that inside foot as my guide once again. Okay, do a little reversing here at the beginning, just like we did on the top, and just sew across. And we'll repeat the exact same process with the pocket that goes on this end. So there'll be another pocket just right here.
Coming up, we'll be creating and sewing the webbing handles.
We measured 101 inches to right here, and I'm going to use the Sailrite Edge hot knife, the cordless version, to cut off this, cut this webbing in half. And I have the precision cutting foot in there, which means I don't need a glass underneath. And I'll cut it off, and there we go. I folded my webbing directly in half, so I have two even ends. And then I'm just going to stick a pin through here to mark the center. So in and out. And that's where the center of my webbing is. And then I'm going to take my panel, and I'm going to fold it in half so that it's even. And then I'm going to crease this center edge pretty softly. I don't want to do it too hard. Obviously, it's going to leave a crease mark, which is what we want. And that's so that I can mark and line the center of my webbing up on here. So now I'll take the webbing, and I'll put the center on here, align it with the top of each one of these lines. So the line up here, I want to make sure it's directly on top of that line, directly on the center, and then directly on top of this line over here. Okay, and I'm going to take my pins, and I'm going to now pin this down in this position, making sure that it's nice and even. And you want to do this carefully because you don't want it to be inaccurate. And we'll remove these pins as we sew, so you don't have to worry about it. Right there, top of my pocket, pin this one down. Okay. And then I'm going to take this, my ends, and I'm going to roll them around, making sure I don't put any twists in them, and go put the end down here at our finished bottom. So right there. And then I'll do the exact same thing over here, make sure there's no twists. So all the way across, down here to my finished bottom, and I'm just going to take this piece and I'm going to fold this under right here and pin it in place just like I did the other side. And these initial pins are just to get it in position. I'm going to end up pinning it more. So I'm going to add a few pins on each side, probably 4 total. So I'll put one here, and then I'll put one here, one here, one here. So I'll have it pinned all the way down so it doesn't move at all. You will also get 2 Sailrite logos, one white and one black. We're going to use the black one here. You can choose to use the white one if you'd like. And I'm going to put this like right next to this pocket and pin it in place so that I sew it down when I'm sewing this webbing down. Okay, there we go. And now we're ready to go over to the machine and sew. I'll start right here at this bottom edge so that I can start and create this fold to give us a nice finished look. And this is the bottom of the bag, so you're not really going to see it. And we'll just start sewing. Okay, I'm going to start down here where this fold is. I'll fold this under so it has there's no raw end. And then I'm going to move my needle into the right position, and I'm going to sew along the right side, outside edge of this webbing, very close to that outside edge. So I'll use the outside of the center foot as my guide. And I'm just going to start sewing here, do some reversing. And then I'm going to sew all the way down it. And I don't need to remove the pins until I'm sewing the other direction because the heads are on the other side. If the heads were on this side, I would slowly remove them and make sure the webbing is in the right position as I go. And if you feel like your webbing is crooked, make sure you bury your needle and then adjust it before you continue sewing. Okay, we're going to sew all the way up to the top here. And notice I didn't strike any lines here. That's because you don't really need a line, because the line is actually the top of this pocket. So you want to sew just over or past the top of this pocket. I'm going to remove this pin just so I have a little bit more adjustability on the webbing. And I'm going to sew up till I know my needle is just past it. I can use the reverse lever if I need to do a shorter stitch, which it looks like I do. And right there, bury my needle, coming up, lift the foot, rotate the material, and then I'm going to sew back and forth right here so that I can tack this down nicely, because this is where the stress is going to be. So I'll sew forward, and also in reverse, and I'm going to do this several times. Okay, and then one more time forward, and then we'll turn and we'll sew down the other side. So I'm going to also use my reverse lever to position this stitch because I need it to be even with what it was on the other side. Needle coming up a little bit, lift the foot, and I'm going to have to roll the fabric a little bit. So I'll just create a little bit of a fold here. Push this under the throat of the sewing machine. Lower the foot, and then I'll sew down this side, and I'll do the same thing at the top of the webbing on the other side of the pocket. And I'm going to sew slowly when I sew through this zipper. It is molded tooth, so it's pretty easy to sew through. I don't need to do any reversing or anything, and then I'll just keep sewing. Okay, and when I'm sewing down this side, I will need to remove these pins as I go. So remove the pins and just finish sewing all the way to the other end. And yeah, we'll do the same thing at the top of the webbing over here, and then we'll just sew back to where we started and do a little bit more reversing. And then the process to do the zipper or the webbing on this side is the exact same. Okay, we're coming up to the end here. And I'm going to do some reversing when I get to my other stitches, which are very hard to see because everything blends into the black webbing. There we go. Okay, and you could sew this down if you wanted to. Remember, the stitches on this side of the material will never be seen because there's a lining fabric. So that's your choice. I'm not going to, I don't see a need to. So we're going to go ahead and switch over to this side and sew this one down in the exact same manner. So here we're sewing down the Sailrite tag, and we're just going to sew right up against that edge. No need to do any reversing here. Looks like I got a little too close to the pin, so I'll raise my foot, pull the pin, and lower my foot, and continue to sew down this side, and then do some reversing when we get to the end.
Next up, we'll be adding our zipper and our lining to the main body.
Okay, so now we finished sewing on our webbing, as you can see. There's our tag as well. And now we're going to do our zipper. So it's a very similar process to the pockets, except for there's a lining. So I'm going to cut it with a little bit of extra on each end. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing I did on that one, which is split the zipper apart. And I'm going to put the zipper on so that the teeth are facing inward like this. And I'm going to take it over to the machine and sew it in the exact same process on this end and on this end. We'll show you the first one. We won't show you the second one. Okay, needle in the left position. Start over here at the end with my this outside of the foot right up against the zipper teeth. I'll do some reversing here at the end. Then just sew all the way across it, just like I did with the pockets. Except for I won't be turning it and flipping it right here on the table. I need to add my lining fabric before I sew the top stitch. Okay, so now I have the panel facing up on the table, and I haven't done anything with the zippers after I sewed them on. And I'm going to take my lining fabric, and I'm going to line it up to this edge, and I'm going to sew this lining fabric down right on top of that zipper all the way across this end. And I'll show you that, and then we'll do the exact same thing on the other side, and I won't show you that one, so I'll just show you one of these ends. Okay, so I'm going to take my lining, I'll line it up to this edge so that it's even at the corner, just like that. Put it under the foot. My needle's in the left position, so I'm going to put my stitch in the same spot I did for the zipper. Let me just get my material in position here. Position it down right along that zippered edge, and then I'll hold my trailer just right there. Do a little bit of reversing here. And I'm going to sew it down. And take your time with this. It can be a little difficult since there's a lot of fabric and it's loosely on top of itself, so don't rush through it. There we go. And I'm using the zipper teeth as my guide, so I can feel the left side of the foot is right up against them. So all I actually have to do is line this lining fabric up to that end and just keep sewing. Pretty easy. Okay, and so now we're just going to pull these through one another. Looks kind of odd on camera, obviously, but all you're really doing is flipping it so that, just like you'd flip a pillowcase. Get it nice and smooth. And now I'm going to take my fingers here at the top, and I'm going to crease these fabrics so that they're right on top of each other. And if anything, I want the lining fabric to be a little farther. It might not be possible to get it farther, but as long as they're right on top of each other and you sew accurately, it'll work out well. Okay, and I'll do the same thing to this end over here. And this is the outside, so this is the side that's most important when it comes to getting it straight. So make sure that you put the time into getting this nice and even all the way across the zipper, getting it creased down well, so that when you sew it, you get a beautiful stitch all the way across. And obviously do the same thing on this end as well. Okay, my needle's in the right position, and I'm going to use the outside edge of the inside foot as my guide. Do a little bit of reversing here at the beginning. This reversing will be sewn into this circle. Hold the trailers. If you have the Worker Bee Power Pack, you can turn it down, just so you get a nice slow speed control going all the way down this end. And you can sew at your own pace. And I'm going to be careful and try to line this up as best I can. Take your time with this. This is probably the most important stitch on the entire bag, so definitely don't rush this. Okay, I'm going to bury my needle and check it just to make sure we're going through the lining as well. And if you can see, we definitely are. Looks really good. So we'll just continue down this side. Here's the outside of the bag, and you'll notice we are a little bit off with our lining. This is definitely easily enough for our 1/2 inch seam allowance, but we do have a little bit of excess over here on this end, and I'm just going to take my scissors and trim this off. Not a problem at all. And then I'm going to go back to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew a tacking stitch right up against the edge of this lining fabric. And you'll never see this tacking stitch because it'll be in your seam allowance. But the reason I'm doing that is because when I sew the circle, if this fabric is free and loose, it's really hard to line it all up. So it's a lot easier if you sew a tacking stitch. So I'm going to start sewing just short of this edge right here and sew all the way over to this edge. So as you can see here, just a tacking stitch down the end. Wasn't super accurate, just made sure that I was well within my 1/2 inch seam allowance. So my 1/2 inch seam allowance will be like all the way in here. And I did that to both sides, this side too.
In this chapter, we'll be creating the round ends.
So I'm cutting two 3.5 inch strips of our webbing, and I'm going to use a hot knife to touch the ends, but you could also use a lighter just to seal the end of the webbing. And then I'm going to take my scratch awl, on these two end pieces, and you can see it says location for D-ring right here at the top. I'll remove my pen, fold it over to where that dark line is, and then I will just strike this line right across where that one is. And I'll do the same thing with this one right here. Just like that. Okay. And now I have one of my 1.5 inch D-rings come in the kit. I'll run my webbing through here like this, down about, I don't know, an inch or so, and then I'll fold this one up so that it's right on top of that. And then this, let me remove this other pin, is going to go down with the top of the webbing right on that line, just like that. And I'm going to take this to the machine and we're going to sew around it. And one thing you do want to be paying attention to here is you want to stand and look at the panel straight to make sure that the D-ring isn't at an angle, because you can actually accidentally skew it like this and then it'll never go on properly and it'll always look ridiculous. So make sure that it's straight. And let's go to the sewing machine. Okay, our needle's in the right position and we're going to line this up to our the line we struck on there, making sure that it's nice and flat. And then also looking at it to make sure that it looks even, just like I was saying before. It's very important that it looks even, and make adjustments if it doesn't. And then we're going to sew with the outside of this foot right up against our D-ring here at the top. And I'm going to do some reversing here. Looks like we need to go a little bit forward. There we go. Hold my trailers. I'll reverse a tiny bit at the beginning, and then I'll sew across it back and forth several times to lock this in place. Okay, one more time after this. And this just makes sure that the stress on the shoulder strap obviously the stitches don't break free. And I'll position my needle with the reverse lever, coming up a little bit, lift my foot, rotate it, sew down here to the bottom edge. And we'll just continue to sew around this and to the end and do a little reversing there. Then we'll do the same thing with the other circle. We won't show that one. And then here's where we'll do our reversing. Okay, now we have our two end pockets, pocket A and pocket B. I'm going to remove the pin and use my scratch awl to mark this spot for the double hem. And I'll do that on both of these pieces. So I'll do this one as well, but we're just going to show you this one. And then I'll repeat this process off camera. So I'll take my clear acrylic ruler, line it up to those marks, strike my line across, fold to that mark. And this is a double hem, so I will fold a second time right on top of that raw edge, just like that. And now we're going to take it to the machine and we're going to sew right across this top edge. Okay, needle's in the right position. We're going to use the outside of that inside foot as our guide. And I'm going to do some reversing here at the beginning. Just a little bit of reversing back and forth. And then I'll just sew across the top of this pocket. Pretty simple. I'm going to show you the entire process to finish one end of the bag, and then you can finish the other end of the bag, and I won't need to show you that. So here's our pocket. It goes on the outside, obviously directly below the webbing, and we'll use that to even it out so it's straight across. And then I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to put the lining fabric on the back side of this material. I'll flip it back over, make sure this is even, and then I'll take some pins. And I'm going to do a tacking stitch all the way around the perimeter, but I just want to make sure this is held in place when I take it over the machine. And I'll pin here, and I might put a pin up here and a pin down here too. Needle's in the right position still. I'll start just past this pin. And this is only a tacking stitch, so I'm not going to sew I'm going to sew on the outside of my 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'm just going to zip around the perimeter, sewing all of this down. Doesn't have to be perfectly straight or anything. You just want to make sure you're sewing well inside of that 1/2 inch seam allowance.
In this chapter, we'll be installing our sliders and trimming any excess material off the outside of our main body.
Okay, I made sure the bag was flush on the ends, so these two ends meet. And then I actually trimmed the zipper, I already trimmed the zipper off so that these two ends are flush, and these two ends are flush over here. So you see the bag lines up right here on the end, and we're going to install our sliders now. So I'll take one slider on this end, and it needs to face inward. And I will, I want to get it on evenly, so I'm going to take my time and make sure I get it so the teeth line up properly. There you go, there's one. That's off. You see those two ends? That's really far off, so that means I have to do it again. So that means that I actually probably need to trim this, these teeth a little bit more. So right to there. Okay, and now we'll put it on so that they're even, and that should be nice and even. There we go. Much better. That's perfect right there. You see how the ends are even? Okay. And I'll pull this towards the center. Okay, and for the second end, we're going to make it as even as possible. Obviously, we've already have this end on right. So we're going to trim this so that these are flush and then install another slider heading in the other direction so that we have two sliders on the outside of our duffel. So get it on there nice and evenly. Oops. There we go. Oops, pulled it off right when I had it on there. There we go. Pull it into the center. And now we have two sliders for our duffel bag. If you get to the center with both of your zippers and you find that it's uneven, as in there's like a big bunched up bubble right here, that means you need to pull one of the sliders off and restart it. And make sure that you don't have a bubble here in the center. So your zipper should be pretty much flat when you're finished, just like this. So this side is perfectly even, and that's perfect for us. This side's a little off. This is nothing to be alarmed at. I'm actually just going to take my scissors. I don't need this excess of the zipper anymore, and I'm just going to trim this off so that these are flush. All the way down to the bottom. That's good right there. Doesn't need to be better than that. And now I'm going to take the bag and I'm going to turn it inside out. So I want to be careful not to pull too hard on the zipper because it could separate it again. So I'm just going to pull nice and smoothly and get it all the way inside out. There we go. Now we're ready to take it to the machine and sew on the circles. And I am going to trim this, trim the zippers, so the ends of the zipper so that they're perfectly flush with the application. So this one already is because we just trimmed it, but this side we'll trim it as well. Right there, okay?
Coming up, we'll be sewing our circles to the barrel.
Okay, now I'll take one of my end circles and I'm going to fold it in half. Oh, actually I want to fold it the other way because if I fold it that way, I can't fold directly on the webbing. And I'm not going to get it, it's not going to be perfectly in half, but I want this to be the center. So I'm really only worried about the top up here. So you don't really need to fold the rest. And then I'll cut a little triangle right here. And that is the center or close to the center. Let's see. Looks like it's off a little bit. Needs to move over a tiny bit. No harm done if you cut it and it's slightly off right there. And then there we go. There we go. That's good. So there's the center of our panel. We're going to sew a 1/2 inch inside of that, and this will line up with the zipper. So now we're ready to go to the sewing machine. Okay, I have my my zipper right here, and I'm going to line up the center mark I put. It's a little deep. It's not it's not past a 1/2 inch. I already checked it, so we're good. I'll line that up on the center of the zipper right there. I have my needle in the center position, and I'm going to sew this at a 1/2 inch all the way around the perimeter. So it's important that you start this well. So right there, I'm at a 1/2 inch, and I will put a magnetic sewing guide on here just to be a little bit of an extra guide. But you don't have to have one. You can actually do it by eyesight. So I'm going to do some reversing here. Hold my trailer first, and I'm going to do a decent amount of reversing over the zipper because if you don't, sometimes you can see light through the zipper. And now we're going to sew around the bag. And take your time with this. If you need to turn the worker bee down, turn the worker bee down. We're going to sew it a 1/2 inch around the bag, just moving our piece into place. Make sure you don't sew through any of the handles. It's usually pretty hard to do, but it is possible. And I'm just going to keep pulling my round end over to the 1/2 inch location. Make adjustments as you go. So keep pulling everything around so it's nice and straight. It's actually pretty easy to sew this. Just got to take your time with it. And anytime you need to make adjustments, bury your needle. We're coming to the end here. Just keep sewing it a 1/2 inch all the way to the end. And sometimes it is possible when sewing, let me get my needle buried before I make the adjustments. Sometimes when sewing a circle onto an object, well, most of the time, it is possible to have a tiny little wrinkle here at the end. It doesn't look like we're gonna have one here, which is awesome, but I would not panic if you do, because it can happen. Okay, we're coming up to our original stitches, and we're going to do some reversing here. And there we go. And there is our circle sewn onto the outside. And we just have to do the exact same thing on the other side of the bag. Same process. So I'll literally turn the bag around, line up that top mark, and sew it the exact same way I did before.
In this chapter, we'll be binding our inside seam allowance.
Okay, so we're going to trim around the perimeter. About half of our seam allowance is what we're trimming off here. And that's so we can bind this edge and have no raw ends on the inside of our bag. And that's the tacking stitch you see me cutting off right there, so there's nothing to worry about there. Here's some grosgrain webbing, and we're going to use this to bind the perimeter of our circle. And I like to start up here at the top, just a little bit in front of the zipper. And the reason I don't start at the bottom is because when you look down in the bag, you're going to see the bottom. You're not going to see the top. So I'll start right here, and I'm going to use a stapler to staple this around the perimeter. So my hands are probably going to block most of it, but you can see maybe the second one. Okay, and then I'll just keep working this binding on and stapling it pretty much probably every inch or so. You got to put a lot of staples in here to get this held on for sewing. So take your time with this. It's pretty important. Okay, and we'll work all the way around the perimeter. So I've also found out that it's a little bit easier, I think, to staple it with the bag upright like this. So when I come to the end here, I'm actually not going to worry about finishing with a fold or anything. I'm just going to trim this with about a 1/2 inch extra right there and wrap it around, and then I'll put a staple here. And then I'll put these two together and I'll staple here as well. Then we'll take it over the machine. Okay, I have my needle in the center position, and I'm going to actually just even this center foot up with basically right in the center of that grosgrain. I'll lower my foot, and I'm starting close to the top. So if this is the joint right here, so I'm like right over the zipper. I don't know if you can see. So the zipper is like right behind the foot. And I want to start at the top because I don't want people to see the reverse stitches. I'll hold my trailers, and I'll do some reversing here, just a little bit. And then I'll sew around the perimeter, and I'll take my time doing it. And I want to make sure that this is covering my stitches. And it's not always easy to see the bottom, that the bottom's covering. So some of the time it's not going to be perfectly even. But it's the inside of a bag, and it actually looks really good even if it's not perfect. So don't expect it to be perfect. And just keep working your way around the perimeter, burying your needle when you're doing adjustments. It's pretty easy. Okay, and once you're finished, just I'm just using a regular screwdriver, and I'll remove all the staples all the way around the perimeter. And that's what it's going to look like on the inside of the bag. Looks really nice, and I'll do the same thing to the other side. So the kit does not come with basting tape, but I actually wanted to show you a different method for putting this on, because I know a lot of you probably have basting tape. So I ran 1/4-inch basting tape down both outside edges of this, and then I'm going to peel off the transfer paper, and all I'm going to do is simply center this and fold it over all the way around the perimeter. And this is actually a little easier than the staples, but obviously the kit doesn't come with the basting tape because it's not necessary for any other aspect of the actual bag. And it's really not necessary for this either. You could also use 3/8 inch basting tape to do this. 1/4 inch does make it a little easier, but they both work. So we finished sewing our grow grain on, and now I'm going to open the bag up. And these are non-locking sliders, so you can just push them apart. And then I'm going to turn this right side out.
In this final chapter, we'll be creating our shoulder strap.
Okay, so I have my 2 snap hooks, one of my tri-bar adjusters. You should have plenty of these. They come in, I think, 5 packs. And then I have 58 inches of webbing. There should be even more left over, but I cut this to 58 inches. And I've already hot knifed the ends, but I'm also going to cut little corners out of the ends just so these don't stick out when I sew it down. So corner off this side, corner off this side. Doesn't have to be perfectly even. Same thing with this one. So I have the webbing stretched out straight, and on the tri-bar adjuster, you'll notice there's ridges on one side. This is the upside, and the other side is the downside. We're going to have it with the upside facing us. I'm going to feed this up, and then back down through. And we're going to take it over the sewing machine, and I'll have about 3 inches here, and we're going to sew this down. Okay, so I lined up to my center foot with the outside edge of this webbing, and I'm going to do some back tacking here, and we're going to do a couple stitches on this webbing. Just go back and forth a few times. Okay, then I'm going to lift my foot. I'll go over about 3/8 inch or so, lower my foot, and we'll do more back tacking here. So I'm just going to tack it in like 3 or 4 places all the way up this webbing just to hold this in place. Okay, then just keep going. I'm not even trimming my stitches. I'm just gonna sew one more. Then it'll be sewn down. So we have the tri-bar adjuster facing up. We do not want to have it upside down. We want to have the top side up. And I'm going to take my other end of the webbing, and I'll take my, let me flip it around here. So I still have the tri-bar facing up the other way, and I want to feed this on so it's facing down, okay? So it's facing down like that towards the table. And then I'll take this end, and I'll go up, through, over the top, and back down in, just like that. And now you can see we've started the adjustable portion of the strap right there. Okay, and then I'm going to flip it around again, take my other snap hook, make sure that I look over here and see, so this is the downside, so I also want this to be the downside. So I wouldn't want to feed it up like this. I want to make sure I feed this down through, like that. And then I'm going to sew this on using the exact same process I did right here with the 3 stitches, but I'm only going to leave a little bit, just like this. So I'll sew this 3 times right here, and I'll show you what's next. Now our strap is complete, and we can put it on the bag. So just snap it to each end. And then just throw it over your shoulder, just like that. And this is how you adjust it right here. So if you pull on this side, it gets smaller. Then if you push this down, it gets bigger, just like any other strap would. Okay, and now we can unzip it, take a look on the inside. There you go, looks really nice. So here's our pockets on each side. We have one on this side and the other side. Very nice, pretty deep too. Then in pockets, right there. Very nice.
You can see the full list of materials in the description below. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell to be notified when new videos become available. From all of us here at Sailrite, I'm Seth Grant. Thanks for watching.